All right, and so a couple things I want to preface this with. First off, my voice is kind of going. I'm going to project as much as I can, but just so you're aware, and especially to our friends online, if you can't hear me, please let Emery know and I will do my best. The second thing I want to say is that as a Baha'i, we don't have any clergy, we don't have, so as a member of the Baha'i faith, I'm speaking for myself, I'm not speaking for the Baha'is. This is my best understanding of the Baha'i faith. And then the last thing I want to say is, and I always start off this talk with this, if I talk the entire time, we're all going to be really, really bored. So, what really works the best is if you guys jump in, whatever questions you have. Oftentimes when I give this presentation, I never get to the actual presentation, and that's totally fine. Okay. So with that, I would like to start off and see, does anybody have any questions, thoughts that you want to start off with in trying to understand this? Because it's important to me that you get what you need out of it.
Where does the word Baha'i come from?
Okay, so a Baha'i is a follower of Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah means the glory of God, so a Baha'i is the follower of the glory.
That's Arabic.
Yes.
How do you spell that?
BAHA''I. Any other burning questions before we get going? All right, and please jump in as we go along too. All right, so. Okay. So parts of this I'm going to read, parts of it there are quotes, and for those quotes, I'm going to ask for your help to read them out loud. That's okay. If anybody doesn't want to read one, you can just pass. No judgment. All right. So the first idea is that all peoples and one common faith. You have that book, One Common Faith, and that's it explains in a lot more detail where this idea comes from. But basically, it's a world religion. The purpose is to unite all people, as is the purpose of every religion, which we'll hear more about. One universal cause and one common faith. Now, on that point, I always want to say one common faith does not mean one religion, right? One common faith, the idea is that all religions, all faiths believe in God or a higher power of some sort, and working towards getting connected to that, as Ron was telling us about, right? So it's that we all have that in common. That's the one common faith that we're talking about. Make sense? All right. Baha'is are followers of Baha'u'llah. As I said, that means the glory of God. And we believe that he is the promised one of all ages. So if you look at all religions, you see each of them promises a return, right? We believe in the idea of progressive revelation, which is another thing I'll go into in more detail in a little bit. But the idea here is that each messenger from God has brought a renewed message, but it's the same message from the same God in the terms that the people of that time can understand it, if that makes sense. So as mankind matures and can handle a little more over time, God renews the message, gives us a little more over time. So we believe that Baha'u'llah is the most recent messenger of God. Okay, so can we start with Bernie for the readings? Can you read the quote?
Okay. That which the Lord hath ordained as the sovereign remedy and mightiest instrument for the healing of all the world is the union of all its peoples in one universal cause, one common faith.
All right, so any questions about this? Ideas?
Do your quotes come from some
So most of the quotes are going to be from Baha'u'llah.
Okay.
And I'll tell you if that varies. This one is Baha'u'llah from Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'llah, is the name of the book.
the common or the universal causes again, I guess I didn't wrap my head around it as you said it the first.
Sure.
Universal cause is,
The idea of uniting mankind.
okay. And the common faith is.
The common faith is I use the term God, you don't have to use the term God, you can say higher power, you can say Allah, we believe that all names for the same entity.
Okay,
Divine providence.
Yeah,
Very similar to what Ron was talking about. Ron,
the spiritual aspect of,
and Buddhism is this practice that's focused on that. As opposed to a religion that has about.
So does Baha'i have a doctrine?
how would you define doctrine?
Well, it said religion has no doctrine.
but he didn't define it.
Right,
Yeah.
so to answer the question, I gotta know, how are you defining doctrine?
Well, rules and regs. I mean, that's how I see it.
Yes, yes. So, yeah, the answer to that, under those terms is yes. The book is the Kitabi Akdas. This is written by Baha'u'llah. It's known as the most great book and it has the laws of the Baha'i faith.
Okay.
So I'll pass that around and you all can take a look at it. Yes, Anne-Marie?
Okay, when Baha'i talks about all religions, are they specifically focused on revealed religions or do they connect to the indigenous nature-based religions as well?
So Baha'is recognize all religions that are not cults, essentially. You know, and the definition of that is complicated to go into, but yes, we do recognize native religions and those sorts of things.
Thank you.
Mhm. All right, so what is God? That's a complicated question, right?
Hours in seminary.
Right.
About that.
So what Baha'u'llah tells us is God is unknowable in his essence, which is why it's a complicated question. It's our job as human beings to try to understand God, but it's a paradox because God is essentially unknowable, right? It's beyond human comprehension. That doesn't mean we're not to try to figure it out, because figuring it out is a part of the human process of human condition. But you can never fully understand it just because we are finite and God is infinite. Does that make sense? Okay. So we should not make images of God in our mind, thinking of him as a man. I just don't believe in the concept of, you know, a bearded guy on a cloud.
Personification.
Right, exactly. In general, that which has been created cannot understand its creator. So we have a picture here of the carpenter creating a table, right? That table has, you know, an energy and a, you know, it's molecules moving around as we are, but it can't comprehend the carpenter that made it. And that's an analogy for kind of our relationship with God. You know, we exist, we have a consciousness, we have a lot of amazing things, you know, and capacities, but the capacity to fully understand the creator is beyond us. Make sense? All right. So God is the creator of all things. The reason behind our creation is love. Baha'u'llah teaches us that God loved us and we were created from this love and for that purpose. So Barbara, can you read the next quote for me?
No, I'm sorry, I can't.
Okay, no problem. All right, Ron, can you read it?
I'll try. O son of man, I love thy creation, hence I created you. No, I can't read it.
All right,
Wherefore do thou love me, that I may name thy name and fill thy soul with the spirit of life.
thank you, all three. So the idea here, again, this is Baha'u'llah, and this is from his book, The Hidden Words, which are just short quotations that really kind of explain things in depth, although they're brief.
And who is that a picture of?
That would be a picture of the no, that's not, that's one of the gatherings at the University House of Justice. It's a little bit older picture. The idea here is just what we talked about a minute ago. God created us out of love. And that goes into so much, it's like the process of creation, the purpose of creation, all of those sorts of things. All right. All right, so then once you have the concept of God, you can get to the concept of the eternal covenant. So a covenant essentially is a deal between two parties, right? So we have an eternal covenant with God, that God promises he will never leave us alone. And in return, we promise to recognize his messengers and try to follow their teachings. Does that resonate for everybody? Pretty much the same deal you all have, right? All right, so then the manifestation of God. So I mentioned, God's messengers. In the Baha'i faith, we call those manifestations. And the idea is that a manifestation of God is just that. It's a perfect reflection of God on earth. And just to clarify, because this can be a confusing idea sometimes for people, a manifestation is not God, but a manifestation is the voice of God, the word of God. So they're born in a human body, but they have divine knowledge and understanding that they can share with us. Does that make sense? Sort of. Again, it's another big concept. All right, so then again, we have the metaphor here of this mirror. So if God is like the sun, we can't interact with the sun, right? That would be really bad for us. It's too much, right? But we can interact with its reflection in a mirror. We can understand how that works. We all saw this with the eclipse recently, right? Don't look directly at the sun, right? But there are ways, we can use glasses, we can use mirrors, we can use pictures, things like that to interact with it and understand it. So the manifestation is like that mirror, and we're all like that mirror, except some of our mirrors are dirtier than others, right? A manifestation has a perfectly clean mirror, whereas I might have some dust on. That makes sense? All right. All right, any questions so far? These are all kind of big comments.
So is a manifestation, a person who hears the word of God or the word of higher power or the word of whatever?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, and shares it, and their job is to share it with mankind. So manifestations would be Noah, Abraham, Krishna,
Yeah.
Moses, Zoroaster, Buddha, Jesus Christ, Muhammad, the Bab, and Baha'u'llah.
And those that we don't know. of.
Right, and those that we don't know of, like some of the Native American teachers and. Anything else? All right, so the plight of humanity and the promise of this day. And Angie, right? Can you read the quote for me? You can't read it? Okay. Mary?
The plight of humanity is the promise of this day, but Baha'u'llah says, this is the day in which God's most excellent favors have been poured out upon men. The day in which his most mighty grace has been infused into all created things. It is incumbent upon all the peoples of the world to reconcile their differences, and with perfect unity and peace, abide beneath the shadow of the tree of his care and loving kindness.
Thank you. So, at this point, it's interesting to recognize the different teachings that people have been raised in or have found. So I'd like to actually just go around the room and see what teachings people are following today. So Patricia, what are you following?
I'm a Christian, so I follow the teachings of Christ, but as a seminarian, I started learning about all these different areas of faith and spirituality and how spirituality isn't necessarily a religion. And I find that there's a lot of commonalities.
Absolutely. Yep, Elizabeth?
I'm Unitarian Universalist, so we are a non-doctrinal religion. We're bound together by the promises we make to one another for how we will behave with one another in community and in the world. And so Unitarian Universalism officially recognizes 6 sources of faith. Direct experience, the mystic and connective. Teachings of Jewish and Christian traditions, out of which we have come. Teachings of the major world religions, of all world's religions, from which we draw experience and additional sourcing. The natural world and the teachings of nature-based religions. And 2 more that I'm like.
I put you on the spot.
I know, I'm like, and other things, oh, the guidance of science and reason.
Mhm.
Our own shared collective learning about the world. Yeah, so the way that Unitarian Universalism expresses that is many paths up one mountain. Sometimes is the metaphor or the image of the world cathedral, in which we are all looking toward the light through stained glass. Everyone sees a little bit of a different image, a different color, but it's all directed by the light, which is common to all of us.
Thank you. Mary?
I choose to use the phrase a follower of Jesus. Most of the time, rather than Christianity, since it has been so co-opted over the years and especially recently. I'm an American Baptist pastor, but I also work with the Episcopal churches here, so that's 2 very different ways of being a Christian, but they don't negate each other, at least not in my practice. But I've also found wisdom from other religions and just totally enjoy finding those connections that work for me. And yeah, I'll leave it there.
Where you come from, Angie?
I'm a Christian. I'm right now, what is that church? St. Barnabas Episcopal. They don't go in there, but as far as I don't know, I'm flexible.
Okay.
Right now, just trying to find a way.
Nice. All right, and it's Diane?
Yes,
Okay.
I would say that I also am a follower of Jesus. And perhaps because I'm a reference librarian, I draw from more than one faith tradition, having also been in various denominational settings over the course of my life. And I am becoming more open and aware of the ecumenical aspects of spirituality and faith traditions. And so I have had virtually no experience here, but there are items that are resonating.
Got it. All right, Ron, we heard about it, but tell us again.
Well, I think the thing that you point out are the various ways one gets in touch with the spiritual realm. I'm definitely in first school, direct experience.
Right,
Can I just add one thing about being a Methodist? John and Charles Wesley started the Wesleyan movement, and after they died, the Methodist Church history and all that. But there is a thing that we use called a quadrilateral. And that's, we base our decisions on scripture primarily, as well as tradition, reason, and experience. So that's a way that we, as Methodists, try to make decisions, and that's where the method part comes from the word Methodist.
Well, I thought it was Methodist.
We have a method, it's very intentional. So I just wanted to add that.
So Anne Marie has something and then we'll go back to Barbara.
Yes, I wanted to provide Liz's input.
Yes.
She shares that she is a druid, and it's a nature-based spiritual tradition with a focus on storytelling, healing, and peacemaking. It's decentralized, non-dogmatic, and syncretism is welcome. There's a strong belief in all things ultimately being connected. And she happens to be a polytheist and animist, but there are many different theologies within the Druid community.
Nice.
So thank you, Liz, for sharing that.
Yes, thanks, Liz. Barbara, how about you?
I'm Catholic.
Okay,
I was brought up congregational. And then explored a lot of things and still do.
all right, very nice. And Bernie?
I was raised very fundamentalist Christian and found Baha'u'llah, found out about Baha'u'llah when I was 19 in college. I think that all, I don't know how to say it, my belief is that it's really about each individual person's path to God, and they're all appropriate. They're all, you know, when it comes to what's right, I think we're all right where we're supposed to be.
So the reason I ask at this point is one, so we can kind of see some of those common themes, right? And you heard as people were talking about some of the common ways that they approach religion and the practice of religion. And you can also see that whichever, I'll say manifestation, teacher, whatever you want to say, you're following, they came at a time when humanity needed them to help us, you know, get over a hump in our evolution, let's just say. That's my words, totally my words, right? But this idea that, you know, mankind kind of goes up and down in our progress over time. And that from time to time, we need some intervention, you know, we need a refresher. And so that's this idea when we talk about the plight of humanity and the promise of this day. Baha'is believe that human beings come to these points in time where we need some guidance to stay on track. And we believe that Baha'u'llah is that most recent reiteration of the guidance. Or not is, but brings that most recent reiteration of the guidance. That makes sense? All right. So the aim of the Baha'i faith is to unify humanity. That's, in a nutshell, if you know nothing else, that's the only thing you need to know about the Baha'i faith. All right. We're different from one another in all kinds of different ways. We have different capacities, we have different appearances, we have different passions, all of those sorts of things. But we're all human beings. We're all interrelated. As Liz said. Right? So if we, and as human beings, sometimes we have feelings that are not quite in line with those teachings. If we have feelings of hatred or things along those lines, we need to immediately replace them with feelings of love. And I think you can find that in the teachings of every religion as well. So the idea of the oneness of humanity, it's an undeniable truth. I mean, at this point in our evolution, science supports this, right? We're all interrelated. And if you didn't believe that before COVID, you gotta believe it now, right? All right, so when somebody joins the Baha'i community, they're agreeing to participate in developing that unity. And there are a lot of quotes and passages that focus specifically on the how-to of developing that unity. All right, Elizabeth, would you be willing to read this one?
Sure. Your divine destiny for unity. Baha'u'llah has drawn the circle of unity. He has made a design for the uniting of all the peoples and for the gathering of them all under the shelter of the tent of universal unity. This is the work of the divine bounty, and we must all strive with heart and soul until we have the reality of unity in our midst. And as we work, so will strength be given unto us.
Thank you. So the idea is that, in religions of the past, sometimes because there was not a lot of literacy, because it was harder to pass these things on outside of verbal methods, it was harder to establish exactly what pattern to follow. And so religions tended to go a lot of different directions, different interpretations, those sorts of things. One thing that's different about the Baha'i faith is that because of the time that this came to us, which we're going to discuss more in a minute, more of the history, because of the time this came to us, we have all of the writings in writing, so we can look at exactly what was said at each time, if that makes any sense. All right, so I'm going to go into some history. Do we have any questions before that?
History.
History. History. All right. So Baha'u'llah, manifestation of God, born in 1817 in Tehran, which was the capital of Iran. From his early childhood, he showed signs of greatness. These are patterns that you're going to see throughout all religions too. As children, they showed signs of what they would later be able to manifest. He received some instruction at home, but he did not attend school. He was endowed with innate knowledge from God. And again, you'll see that as a pattern from various teachers. Baha'u'llah came from a noble family. When he was a young man, he was offered a high position in the court of the king. His father actually worked in the court of the king, so he was offered that position when he got old enough. He refused it, deciding instead to work helping the oppressed, the sick and the poor, and championing the cause of justice. So rather than accept those, he came from a wealthy family, rather than accept, to continue that, he wanted to help those who needed help. Again, it's another pattern you'll see.
What have you, his family then came from Muslim
Yes,
traditions?
yes, yeah. So I say, some people say, is Baha'i an offshoot of Islam? And I say, well, yes and no. Baha'i is an offshoot of Islam, like Christianity is an offshoot of Judaism. They're related, they're definitely connected, they're not the same, it's a progression. All right, so suffering and influence. Baha'u'llah's sufferings began the moment he arose to proclaim the cause of God. So suffering is another common theme that you'll see through all the manifestations. He lived a life of exile, imprisonment, and persecution, and he was put in chains in a dark, invisible dungeon in Tehran. So this picture you see on the right here it's very grainy on this particular screen, but it was down in like a tunnel, right? And there were rats and bugs and things, and this is where they kept prisoners at that time in Tehran. So it was called, in English, it's called the Black Pit.
So at the very top on the right there is actually the ground level.
Mhm.
And then it's basically showing you underground.
Yeah, so you can imagine what it would be like to be imprisoned there, like far beyond what we have as prisons now, which are not happy places, having worked in one for many years. All right, exile and imprisonment. So you can see here on the map, starting on the right, there, right? You can see Baha'u'llah was exiled 4 times from land to land until he finally ended up in Akka, which was a prison city in the Ottoman Empire. Akka is still there today, and you can see where they've excavated all of these layers of civilizations, and it's pretty, historically, it's just unbelievable. It's an amazing place to be. Nothing can be done to stop his influence. So they kept, every time he would get influence over the people would start listening to him and saying, I wanna know what this guy has to say. The government would send him to a new place because they saw his teachings as a threat, which is another theme that you will see throughout the messages from history. And every time they sent him to a new place, it only served to spread the message that he was trying to share. Does that make sense to everybody? Like I said, most of this should sound familiar from your own traditions as well. All right, the most great prison. This is the prison in Akka. And Patricia, would you be willing to read this? Sure. Thank you.
Remembering my days during thy days and my distress and banishment in this remote prison. And be thou so steadfast in my love that thy heart shall not waver, even if the swords of the enemies rain blows upon thee, and all the heavens and all the earth arise against thee.
Thank you. So again, so most times when I discuss this with people, this sounds pretty familiar.
Oh, yeah.
With this idea of, sacrificing for humanity and.
Yeah, I just want to add that Akka was a crusader city during the Crusades. So to the Ottomans, this was a terrible place, which is why they made it a prison city.
Yeah, they would say if a bird flew over Akka, it would drop down dead out of the sky.
How do you spell Akka?
Well, that varies. If you're looking it up on a map, it's ACCO. In Baha'i writings, it's usually AKKA. All right, Bernie, you get the long one.
The ancient beauty hath consented to be bound with chains, that mankind may be released from its bondage, and hath accepted to be made a prisoner within this most mighty stronghold, that the whole world may attain unto true liberty. He hath drained to its depths, to its dregs, the cup of sorrow, that all the peoples of the earth may attain unto abiding joy, and be filled with gladness. This is the mercy of your Lord, the compassionate, the most merciful. We have accepted to be abased, O believers in the unity of God, that ye may be exalted, and have suffered manifold afflictions, that ye may prosper and flourish. He who hath come to build anew the whole world, behold how they have joined partners with God. They have joined partners with God and have forced him to dwell within the most desolate of cities.
Any questions on that? It's a lot. Does that make sense to everybody?
Puts me in mind of Paul
Yeah.
in many ways.
Yes. Well, I mean, the entire life and dissipation of Christ.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. So the light of truth, as we talked about when we looked at that map, every effort was made by two powerful courts. Those are the King of Iran and the Ottoman Emperor to oppose Baha'u'llah and his teachings. But the light of truth is not easily extinguished. So again, you see, in Christianity, how they tried to stop Jesus and even killing him only caused his religion to grow. In spite of constant persecution, Baha'u'llah continued to reveal the word of God for more than 40 years. And so these are just some pictures of his room in Akka. This is the outside of his home in Akka, where he ended up retiring to once they let him out of the prison, and then his quill.
And like Katrina had said, this happened recent enough that we have the actual implements of his writing. We have, there are many stories of people that visit, went to pilgrimage and visited him, interacted with him.
Speaking of pilgrimage, the shrine of Baha'u'llah. So Baha'u'llah passed away in 1892. And his shrine is located in the Holy Land near Akka. This is actually called Baha'i, but it's right near Akka and anybody can visit it. It's a wonderful place. There. Just some of the pictures of the door to the shrine and then the grounds, part of the grounds.
Is this the house where he lived or is this a separate place?
This is the house where he lived, the last house that he was, okay? And I can pass around this book that has lots of pictures of things that you'll see on pilgrimage.
Yeah, the world center of the Baha'i faith was, Haifa is right across the bay, about 20 miles away. And that's where the world center was.
All right, so, the Bab is another major figure in the Baha'i faith. And a lot of Christians like to compare it to John the Baptist. You know, Bab was the forerunner and his mission was to prepare people for the coming of Allah. We believe that he was also a manifestation of God. And he also gave his life for the salvation of humanity. So his time of teaching was much shorter, but we'll get to that. All right, so for 6 years, he taught ceaselessly that the appearance of the new manifestation of God was near and prepared the way for his coming. He told people that they were witnessing the dawn of the new age, the dawn of the promised day of God. So again, this should sound fairly familiar, right?
Was he in the same location that Baha'u'llah was?
Close, he was in Shiraz. So his suffering and influence. Thousands of people accepted the message of the Bab and began to follow his teachings. But as governments do, the government didn't like that. The government of Iran and the powerful clergy who ruled over the masses rose against him. His followers were persecuted and large numbers were put to death. We don't really know how many, but definitely thousands. The Bab himself was martyred at the age of 31 by a regiment of soldiers who, at the orders of the government, suspended him in a public square and opened fire on him. So we have this, this image shows, and it's really hard to see on this screen, but there is an X. If I can point to it right there, you guys see that X? Kind of at the tip of my finger. So that's the spot where he was put to death. And there's a whole big story behind that we don't have time to go into today, but. All right, so where are we, Diane?
Yes, I'm
Would you be
sorry.
willing to read the quotes?
Yes, thank you. Two prayers of the Bab. Is there any remover of difficulties, save God? Say, praise be God, he is God. All are his servants, and all abide by his bidding. Say God, sufficeth all things above all things, and nothing in the heavens or in the earth, but God sufficeth. Verily, he is himself the knower, the sustainer, the omnipotent.
Yeah.
That says it all.
Yeah, I mean, that's right where it's not this far.
Yeah, so these are two of the prayers that a lot of Baha'is have memorized, just because they're short and they really cover a lot of situations. One thing that's interesting about the Baha'i faith that people often ask about is that we often pray from prayer books. I think I brought one, it's kind of beat up, but I brought one. And that doesn't mean that we can't pray from the heart. You know, we also pray extemporaneously, but we like prayers from the prayer books, partly because we have so many. Just because, you know, again, it's more recent and we have access to these things. And because the words of the manifestations have a lot of power. And so, you know, when you see Baha'is pray from prayer books, that's what that's about. You'll see a lot of that. All right, any questions so far? We're kind of at a pause here. Before I go into kind of currently the way things are working.
I just want to point out that
part of the reason that they did not kill Baha'u'llah is because they killed the Bab and the reaction that occurred. So they realized they couldn't go through that again. And so they chose the banishment route. Historically, that. Obviously, can't read their minds, but it appeared that that was part of the reason.
Public reaction was fairly intense.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes,
It's a safe way perhaps to put it.
all right,
Well, same thing with water, you had a lot of martyrdom.
Yeah.
yeah.
But it flourished and survived. and really-
In fact, the martyrdoms caused more growth.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so the spiritual and administrative world center. Following the martyrdom of the Bab, the remains were recovered by his followers and taken from place to place, hidden from the enemies of the faith. Finally, they were transferred to Mount Carmel in the Holy Land. And here on the left, you can see, this is a picture of the shrine of the Bab on Mount Carmel. There are a few other holy places in Haifa and in Akka. The Twin Cities are the administrative center of the Baha'i faith today. And also the spiritual center, because this is where these two shrines are, which are the most holy places in the world for Baha'is. So that's in Haifa. This is in Haifa, yeah. So the other pictures here, we have the shrine of the Bab on the left. In the middle there is the shrine of the Bab at night from the top of the mountain. On the right is again the shrine of Baha'u'llah, the door to that. And on the bottom is a picture of the Universal House of Justice, which we're going to talk about. Everybody good? Okay, I have 10 minutes left. I'm going to try to keep it to that.
Well, we've been asking a lot of questions.
That's good. Like I said, I rarely get all the way through this, so we get as far as we get. Abdul Baha. So we're going to talk now about a couple of other important figures in the Baha'i faith. So we talked about the idea of the covenant, the eternal covenant, which is our covenant with God. There's another covenant, which is the lesser covenant, and that's our covenant with the manifestation that we're following. Right? So it's in the Baha'i faith, this idea of the covenant is really important because it's how we maintain unity. And so our covenant, in other religions, after the manifestation passed on, there's disputes, there's infighting, and you end up with a lot of different sects. One thing that's different about the Baha'i faith is that there are no sects. A Baha'i is a Baha'i. There aren't different kinds of Baha'is.
Good luck.
Well, it's worked so far.
But we're all different behind.
Right, true. So Baha'u'llah protected his faith against division by endowing it with power of the covenant. And Abdul Baha is his son, and he's part of this idea of the covenant. So he is the sole interpreter and the perfect exemplar are some of his titles. He was the one who was authorized to interpret the words of Baha'u'llah when people had questions and things like that after his passing. So it was provided who that authority would go on to. He's also known as the perfect exemplar in that he is an example of an act of a human being, just a human being, but someone that we can emulate in his actions and behaviors. So before his passing, he stated in the clearest terms in his written will that after him all lives returned to Abdul Baha. He had been raised by Baha'u'llah himself and recognized his station even as a child and had shared the sufferings of his father. Abdul Baha lived on this earth for 77 years. He was born the same night the Bab declared his mission in 1844 and passed away in November 1921. Make sense to everybody? All right. After the passing of his father, the responsibility for the Baha'i community fell on his shoulders. He labored day and night to spread the faith throughout the East and the West. So Abdul Baha was the first one to come to America in 1912. And these are some pictures of some of his visits. Well, that one's obviously in France, the other one is in America. Abdul Baha reminds us of our covenant with Baha'u'llah, and we will not allow the unity of his followers to be broken. United as a worldwide community, we will labor until the oneness of mankind, humankind has been firmly established. Thank you, Barbara.
Yes, I have something at 11, so I
Yeah,
enjoyed this.
thank you for being here. All right, any questions about how that got passed down so far?
No, but I have a slightly different question.
Okay,
So how many adherents worldwide? Just out of curiosity.
right. It's, we would say about 700,000 now.
Worldwide is, somewhere between 5 and 7.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm terrible at numbers.
No, it's okay.
700,000 is the US.
Okay,
No,
thank you.
I just was a little bit curious.
Yeah, no, that's a common question.
Yeah, it's, I don't know if you get to this, but it's, the Baha'is are spread out.
Mhm.
So there are very few in any one area, except I guess India, Congo, there are a couple of places where. There are a couple of places it's starting to get concentrated.
A little more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
And was intentional, an intentional plan. It's actually the second most worldwide, most widespread religion in the world after Christianity.
So I'm struggling with this idea of you're not gonna split.
Okay.
Because of the disaffiliation crap that we're dealing with in the
Right.
United Methodist Church.
And many other denominations
Well,
have, or
well, yeah, I mean,
everything.
And if you look at the history of Christianity, Martin Luther split, and then John Calvin and Zwingli and all these people split. So I'm really fascinated how y'all haven't split.
Okay, well, let me keep going.
All right.
And I think if I don't answer your question before the end, ask it again.
Okay.
Okay, so the next then in line was Shoghi Effendi. Okay, he was the grandson of Abdul Baha, and again, Abdul Baha put this in writing in his will that we would turn to Shoghi Effendi after him. His title is the Guardian. And he became then the authorized interpreter of those writings. He worked for 36 years, and to go into all of the things that he accomplished would take way more time than I have, but amazing things for one man to accomplish. Today, we have the Universal House of Justice, and all of this was designed by Baha'u'llah. It's all in his writings as to how, the faith progresses. So the Universal House of Justice is elected by the Baha'is of the world. It's a very different kind of election than what we're used to in the United States. It's not contentious, nobody runs, nobody campaigns. Everybody votes for the person they think best for the job, and the person who gets the most votes doesn't win, but gets the opportunity to serve. It's a big job, it's not a winning kind of. So the Universal House of Justice today is the supreme institution of the faith that all the Baha'is in the world turn to. So Patricia, hopefully to answer your question, through this progression of the covenant that was laid out for us, we always have clearly defined what our next steps are. And who's interpreting or, help guide us, maybe that's a good way to put it.
But now also there have been times where people broke that covenant. And, there have been instances, as a matter of fact, some of the family of Baha'u'llah said, he's not really the manifestation, there were split.
Well, that's what I'm thinking, just basic humanity. I mean, there's gonna be somebody who said, I don't agree with y'all, I'm gonna go down the road here.
But over time, any of those false efforts have been revealed, basically, became obvious. But with a single interpreter or a designated interpretation of the writings, since we have so much of the writing, that has been very helpful as well. And I will say that in the teachings of Baha'u'llah, it becomes very clear, and there are lots of ways that he communicates that unity requires diversity. If we're not diverse, we're conforming. Diversity is key to real unity. And we have to respect that.
Liz have a question or
She-
Jambria?
Liz has a question. If there are worldwide elections within the Baha'i community without campaigns or nominations, then there must be a lot of communication. Everyone within the community knows each other really well despite being spread out, question mark?
Ideally, that would be the case. I mean, we are living in the current world. But, so to go a little more into how these elections work. At the local level, we elect what's called a local spiritual assembly. And all the members vote, and the 9 people who get the most votes serve on the local spiritual assembly. Then, we also have national elections. And again, those are held at conventions, and everyone has the opportunity to vote there as well. Then the national spiritual assemblies go to the Holy Land and do the elections of the Universal House of Justice. So it's filtered in that way a little bit so that because I mean, you only have so much capacity to know people, right? But essentially everyone has a say in those elections. And yeah, I mean, in terms of the local and even I would say the national community, we tend to know each other.
Yeah.
To some degree.
You just write down names on a piece of paper. Like when you're the local spiritual assembly, you just write down, you vote for 9 people. And whoever.
You don't have a slate of.
Right, right.
It just has to be a member of the community, you know, is all. But and that, at that level, it is about knowing everyone. And understanding what their strengths are and capacities are. But then it's more representative after that, because the local spiritual assembly will, or the unit convention will elect the national spiritual assembly. The national spiritual assemblies elect the Universal House of Justice.
But it's also, these people who are elected are not representing their constituencies either. You elect people based on what you see as their capacity and their spiritual qualities. And then they vote their conscience when they go to vote, at other levels. So they're not beholden to anybody, they're voting for the person who they think has the greatest capacity and spiritual qualities. That makes sense. It's kind of different model.
There's a similarity to the way in which Methodism.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
through Sort of our levels, I guess you'd say,
Right.
From, our local church to our district, to our conference, to general conference. And so, as an alternate delegate, I've been trying to share this with some of the people who are asking me questions.
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to vote exactly the way
Yeah.
you believe, because I have to listen to
Right.
others and think about how it will affect the greater body,
Yeah, that's
as well
exactly-
as my
yeah.
conscience.
And I just want to say one more thing about this before I wrap up, if that's okay. In the Baha'i faith, we're not electing individuals, we're electing bodies. So those individuals that serve on the local spiritual assembly or the national spiritual assembly or the Universal House of Justice, they are they're individual people, but individual people in the Baha'i faith don't have any power and control. It's those elected bodies that consult and then
Do the decision.
make decisions and things like that. So, when we're on pilgrimage, last time we were on pilgrimage, I ran into a couple of members of the House of Justice walking around on the hill. And it's a conversation with another human being. It would be very different if I was in their meeting, which is really where the authority lies.
And spiritual power comes from the group
Right.
that is administering not at any individual.
In AA, they call it the group conscience.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of
Right.
thing.
So I think I'm out of time, right? Are you? Our time?
The time just runs.
I already know what it is, but I'm pretty sure you have other things you need to do.
Well, we've kind of left this next hour between now and lunch as open discussion time to continue these kind of interfaith discussions, learning about each other, building our own skills in understanding where each other are coming from and expressing our own selves. Okay, so, but before we do that, we want to say thank you.
Thank you.
For all you do for us, for this presentation, but all you do as chair for the Interfaith Network as well. Thank you.
I have to say that's mostly Emery.